Spider-Man does whatever a spider can.
The Spider-Man animated series from 1967 is by far the most memed Spider-Man series and probably the most memeable Spider-Man series we're ever going to get, and for good reason. This show is riddled with bad animation, flat voice acting, reused shots, and overall tonal whiplash between each episode. But besides that, I still really enjoyed this series for the most part. The Spider-Man 67 series is split into 3 seasons, with the first season is split into a total of 20 episodes, but since each episode has 2 individual arcs, there's really 40 episodes in season 1 alone. And then in season 2, each episode is a full 20-minute length long episode, with a total of 19 episodes in season 2, and then season 3 is a mixed bag of both, where some episodes have the half and half structure like in season 1, and then some episodes are just the standard 20-minute length, with the total number of episodes in season 3 being 13, and the total number of episodes in the whole series being 52. This show took a long time to watch and has a lot packed into it. So, what did I think of the series? Well, it's complicated. When I first started watching season 1, I really enjoyed the show. Not like that it's this groundbreaking series or does anything different that we haven't seen in Spider-Man media, but it was fun. I went into this with the expectation of like, yeah, obviously this is the most memeable Spider-Man series, and probably for good reason because of stuff like the poor animation, the reused shots, the voice acting being okay at best and sometimes. So I didn't really know what to think going into this. But before we get into my exact thoughts, I just want to say I'm not comparing this show on an animation standard. I think that would be very ignorant of myself. When trying to compare the animation of this to the quality that we have nowadays with 2 Spider-Verse films, Spectacular, and even the animated series from the 90s, the animation on this does not hold up, and it's just like a time capsule from the 60s of where this show stands. It's very cute looking at the art style retroactively, but it's nothing groundbreaking. So if you're going to watch this show like I did, go into it knowing that you're not going to see anything groundbreaking in this show from a visual standpoint. If anything, you're going to get very annoyed with 90% of the establishing shots being reused from prior episodes, which is due to the lack of budgeting with this show, but that's a whole nother topic later on for the video. One thing you need to think about when reviewing this show is that this premiered 5 years after Amazing Fantasy 15, which was Spider-Man's first appearance, so the showrunners really didn't have a whole lot to go off of. Yeah, there was 5 years worth of comics, and I believe it was around 50 issues that Spider-Man had appeared in that they could base a lot of the characters off of, but there wasn't a whole lot of source material. Like nowadays, whether you're making a comic book, a movie, or a TV show regarding Spider-Man, you have 50 plus years worth of Spider-Man content to pull from with those stories and those different characters and narratives, where this is the first appearance of Spider-Man on television, and there was only 5 years of source material before this. And a lot of Spider-Man villains didn't take their footing and started becoming more popular until later on in Spider-Man's runtime, so a lot of the characters that were drawn from the show, they were either just original characters that the showrunners kind of just had to make up because they didn't have a lot to go off of, or they were Spider-Man's more iconic villains like Green Goblin, Vulture, Electro, Scorpion, and Rhino. But even the versions of those characters that I just spoke about are watered down extremely compared to the counterparts that we know in other forms of media nowadays. So how is the Webslinger's first appearance in television? It's alright. I really enjoyed season 1. I think it's at its peak when each of these mini episodes doesn't have a whole lot of backstory for Peter or these villains. They just kind of throw you right into the action. Like take the Vulture episode for example. The Vulture just comes in out of nowhere on Spider-Man and it's just this crazy old man flying in a bird costume, and there's no backstory, no explanation for any of this. They even have a power for Vulture where he can control the minds of birds, but there is no explanation for hardly anything with these characters, and I think that's where this show is at its best. You just take Spider-Man, you throw him into an episode with a bunch of bad guys, and you try and have him defeat him. He defeats him, and then that's the end of the episode. Later on in the series, in seasons 2 and 3, they have these more long, drawn-out episodes to pad for runtime because they're not doing the half-episode structure that's in season 1, and a lot of the shots are just reused shots from previous episodes, or you have things like Spider-Man web swinging, and they just stay on that stagnant shot for probably like 30 seconds just so they can pad that runtime. I think this series is at its best when you have the short and sweet action. Not to say that there aren't good episodes later on in the series. Season 2, his very first episode, is a basically one-to-one recreation of Spider-Man's origin story. Him becoming a fighter, not stopping the guy at the door, being selfish, and then that guy later on kills Uncle Ben. That episode is brilliant. It's amazing. It's really good, and it's the whole 20-minute length. I think the series is at its best when it's in those short 10-minute interval episodes where they can just throw in some wacky guy, like the episode with Scorpion. Scorpion, To my knowledge, he's never done this in other adaptations, but Scorpion gets injected with like the serum the guy's creating, like the scientist, and then he becomes this like huge like kaiju sized monster that's the size of buildings, and Spider-Man doesn't know how to defeat him, and it's just so entertaining. It's wacky, it's ridiculous, it's campy. I think this is where the show is at its best. A perfect example of the wackiness and weirdness for this series is nowhere else but the first opening montage with the theme song of Spider-Man. There's part of the montage where a steel beam is falling on top of Spider-Man, and he just one hand catches it, defies gravity and all the laws of physics, and then just swings on with it. There's a lot of stuff like that, whether they didn't have the budget or they couldn't actually create the animation of these great feats that they accomplish. I don't know, and I'm not going to look into it any further than just watching the series. But in the very first episode, Peter Parker, for some reason, is driving a car instead of swinging as Spider-Man, and he recklessly falls off a cliff, and he just makes sort of like a web parachute with his car. It lands safely, and then he throws his web almost like a lasso to get his car to bring it back down to the ground once it lands on a tree. I'll put a video of it on screen. It is so odd, but it sets the tone for the series right then and there, especially in 2024. Watching this, like, okay, this is going to be different than anything else I've seen. Another instance is the Mysterio episode where Spider-Man is fighting Mysterio and his goons that are like dressed up as pirates, and they all have pirate swords, and Spider-Man just spins a web and makes his own web sword, and then he just fights off the goons with his sword made out of webs. It is ridiculous, and that takes me to the next thing I want to talk about, which is in this series, Spider-Man does not act like any other version of Spider-Man in a sense of his powers. He creates things like a web slingshot, like a physical slingshot that he shoots a ball of web with. He makes a web shield. He makes a big square out of webs. He makes a web boat. It's like the creators didn't really know what to do with Spider-Man. Like I said, because he had only been out for 5 years, they didn't have a lot of source material. So they were maybe trying to establish and make canon that Spider-Man can make things out of his webs. I honestly don't know, but I find it hilarious. I know Spider-Man in the past is able to make like web parachutes, and you see stuff like that in Ultimate Spider-Man where he does wacky things with his different types of webs, like there's web grenades and shock webs and stuff, like that's different. But when Spider-Man's making a whole pontoon boat out of webs, that's absurd. Speaking of the absurdity in the show, a lot of the episodes follow a very similar structure, where the villains do some sort of crime, Spider-Man gets framed, and then Spider-Man goes and tries to clear his name and defeat the villains, only to be defeated or realize that he's undermatched. Then he goes back to his house. He has a chemistry lab set up, and he creates whatever type of webs are needed to solve the problem, and then that's how he defeats the villains. This happens multiple times throughout the series, and it gets very repetitive. Along with that, once the webs are created, like the new special webs, there's no visual imagery on the screen to show that like, oh, these are shock webs, or these webs are actually like made out of metal and they're really strong. They just look the exact same every single time. Something that doesn't look the exact same every single time, though, is Peter Parker's face. Along with Spider-Man's designs and people like Captain Stacy, it just looks completely different, and I mean completely different throughout the series. I know Season 1 had a different animation company than Season 2 and 3, but there's, to my knowledge, no character models made for this show. You'll have scenes in the same episode, and then also in different seasons, but you'll have scenes in the same episode where Peter Parker looks a specific way, puts on the mask, does the Spider-Man stuff, takes it off, and looks completely different after. The last good thing I want to say about this series before I speak completely negative about this show is that this show was not afraid to take chances and to try new things. I know in my review for Spider-Man the new animated series, I said that I despised all of the original characters and villains that they made in that show, and I'll stand by that. But in this series, they added a whole lot of new different villains and wacky characters that nowadays I would be looking down upon, because like, why are you making these new characters and villains when you have a plethora of source material to pull from? But since this show was created 5 years after Spider-Man's first appearance, there wasn't a whole lot to go off of. There's one episode where there's these two guys called like the Fly Guys, and they basically just stick to the wall and kind of have like a grapple gun like Black Cat, and it's a really compelling episode because they just do a heist and they confuse Spider-Man. And this is where I want to get into the stuff that I didn't like about the series, because this version of Spider-Man is awful. He will just completely fall off rooftops sometimes, or his web will get snapped and he'll just fall straight to the ground and get knocked out. He'll get knocked out by a punch. He has almost no spider sense in this series. There'll be different things that like he's trapped in like behind bars, and instead of breaking the bars like normal Spider-Man adaptations can because he's super strong, this guy's like, well, I'm stuck. Or he'll get webbed up or get tight, like caught up in a rope, and he'll just stand there and be like, well, there's nothing I can do. I mean, it's no wonder the big gag in Across the Spider-Verse is that this version of Spider-Man swings so statically and slow. Because he does. This Spider-Man sucks as a Spider-Man. It's a fun watch, watching all like the goofy villains, and the version of Green Goblin is always trying to steal like witchcraft and mystical stuff. Electro just shoots out little pointy things and isn't really that menacing. Rhino is a bumbling Tom and Jerry fool where he just statically runs across the screen. This isn't a great show, but it is encapsulated in the 60s and is something, looking back retroactively from 2024, it has charm to it, but it's nothing I could recommend in good conscience to Spider-Man friends. The tonal whiplash between seasons 1 and 2 and 3 is night and day. And so if I had to rank just season 1, I would probably put it in a B tier because of how fun and campy it is. But comparing this as one whole show, I'm going to put it on D tier. There's not a whole lot in this show that I unironically thought like, wow, that's a great episode. Except for 2 episodes in this series that I thought were done very well. The first one I already talked about, which was just a ripped one-to-one adaptation of Spider-Man's origin story. So I don't really count that because they were pulling stuff straight from the source material. The episode that I thought stuck out a lot to me was the episode where Spider-Man is stuck in prison after he gets knocked out, and the public is trying to unmask him, so the police take him and put him in jail, not because he's in jail, but they just keep him in jail so he doesn't get unmasked by the public. And once he wakes up, he realizes that he's kind of injured because the Spider-Man sucks and is pathetic and is always weak and injured. And he's like, well, I have to escape. But then he realizes a lot of the prisoners had broken out and have Captain Stacy hostage. And so he turns off the lights throughout the prison. And throughout the whole episode, he's just like one by one picking apart the prison guards, which I really liked. This episode was pretty enjoyable, but this show is just something else, man. The worst thing this series does is be boring. And oh my gosh, it is boring a lot. A lot of the series is just padded for runtime because, yeah, the animation quality is poor because it was in the 60s. They probably had a very, very, very low budget, so a lot of the frames, a lot of the shots, a lot of everything is reused. A lot of voice acting is reused. A lot of frames with previous characters are like the Vulture is used in an episode in season 3 that is in season 1. Like they use it from season 1 in season 3. It's just... this show is a mess, and it's definitely something that's stuck in the past. One thing that did stick out to me about this series is that, unlike almost every Spider-Man animated series besides Ultimate Spider-Man, this show does not end on a cliffhanger. This series ends in the most fitting way for the series. Peter is swinging, his web gets shot out, which is never explained. This is in the finale, by the way. He falls into a train car, and there's a little boy there who's wanting to run away. And so the kid asks, oh, Spider-Man, like, should I run away? And so Peter gives him advice for like 30 seconds total. He says, like, you shouldn't run away because what are you going to do when you run away? And the kid's like, oh, I want to be like you. I want to be the Spider-Man of this one town. And he said, well, do you have what it takes? And the kid's like, what do you mean, do I have what it takes? So Peter gives him advice on how to be a superhero for like 2 sentences, and then for a whole 10-minute series, and it's just a flashback from one of the episodes prior. So you have a 10-minute montage flashback, which is just 10 minutes of a previous episode, and the kid says, wow, I don't want to be like that. Like, that sounds hard. And Peter says, that is hard. Here's another example, and it just shows another 10 minutes of a prior episode, just a straight cut, no montages or cuts or anything, just straight 10 minutes of a previous episode. And that happens, I think, 2 or 3 times, and then at the end, the kid says, yeah, that sounds like that sucks. Why would I want to be a superhero? You're getting beat up all the time. You're awful. Like, you have a bad life. And then the kid runs away, and Peter just stands there with his hands on his hips and is like, yeah, that sucks, or something like that. And then it just cuts to black, and that's the end of the series. The series finale is just like 3 different clips of previous episodes of reused footage. Like, this show is something else, man. It's no wonder people make fun of this show, but there were a lot of enjoyable moments, so I wouldn't say this is a terrible show. I would rewatch the good episodes of this multiple times over rewatching the new animated series, and I'll stand by that. So again, I'm going to put this in D tier, but that's really all I have regarding this series. There's not a whole lot I have to say other than just get together with some friends if you're going to watch this, or go on YouTube and watch a clip of the montage of all the weirdness and wacky stuff in this show, because it is awful. This show, it does some very creative things, and then it also just reuses footage for about 70% of the series as a whole. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you've watched this series, whether you love love it or you hate it, let me know. Let me know your thoughts on the video. Let me know your thoughts on the series, because I haven't had a lot of people that I've talked to that have actually seen this series. If you guys like this video, please like the video and please consider subscribing. It just lets me know that you guys like the videos that I'm making, want me to keep making more videos, and I will keep making more videos because of it. At the time of recording this, 97% of you guys that watch my videos are not subscribed, so please consider subscribing. It would help a lot. Let's get to 1,000 subscribers soon. We hit 500 subscribers recently, so now there's an option for you guys to become members if you'd like. There should be something down below on the screen that says join, like next to the like and subscribe button. This is just something new that I want to try out. It's got 2 tiers. Each tier has its own description of what you guys get with it. There'll be like members only live streams and stuff. So if that's something you're interested in, please consider checking that out and becoming a member. I'd appreciate it a whole lot. It would just help me be able to make these videos quicker and get them out to you guys faster. Like always, if there's anything you guys want to see from me, please let me know. After this, I'm going to be watching all of Spider-Man 2017 and making my review on that. And then that should do it for the tier list. There'll probably be a bigger gap in between videos because to my knowledge, that series has either 3 or 4 seasons. And it's something I'm actually going to be paying in-depth attention to. Unlike this series where it was kind of more campy and cheesy and it's not as serious, I'm expecting this 2017 series to actually have like a arc between each episodes, unlike this where every episode was essentially an anthology. But that's all I have for now. Thank you guys so much for watching and continuing to support me. You guys are the best. Take care.
Can you swing from a thread? Take a look overhead. Hey there, there goes the Spider-Man.